Okay, so welcome to the Power of Great Storytelling. My name is Trisha Norton, um, and I am a storyteller, a yogi, space holder. But before we get started, just outside outlining some general housekeeping rules. So depending on the interactions, this will be about 35 minutes or so, time for questions at the end. But it is interactive, so please do drop anything into the chat box. I'll be monitoring it, um, and be able to see. So if you wouldn't mind just double checking if you're on mute, that'd be super. And there is a spot at the end to ask any questions. And if you don't get a chance to ask any questions or you don't feel comfortable, you can pop me an email. It'll be at the end. My details will be at the end. So storytelling. Yeah, I've always loved stories. Since I was small, I would just get lost in stories, my own mainly, but then also books. Um, and I came back to stories in my mid 20s when I was, I suppose, really looking inwardly, and I was trying to understand what was going on internally with me. And stories were a way of me almost unraveling this, seeing myself in other stories, but also beginning to write my own story. And so I went back to actually study creative writing and do an MPhil in Trinity. And then after that, I went on to study storytelling in the digital age in Columbia, New York, and trained as a life coach and a yogi in the meantime, and many other things in between that. um, Apply and maybe don't apply, but yeah, and I'm just after finishing my first novel. So, and also I do give workshops, obviously, in corporates to help them understand the skills and structure needed to tell their stories in order to connect with their employees or investors or their customers. So it's been a varied and very interesting few years, but definitely my great love has been storytelling throughout my whole life. And so throughout this presentation, I'm going to cover why we relate so much better to stories than facts, the science behind stories, the structure for creating your own story, and some examples of really great storytelling. And lastly, we're going to touch on where the future of storytelling is going. Stories are in our genes. Make sure that we're moving along. Yeah. The stories are in our genes. So as you can see from this campfire, it's a very familiar image, but also, especially in Ireland, we're an island of storytellers. So it's very, very close to our hearts. Um, so, but how does this show up in present times? So one example of this is in 2006, a New York Times magazine journalist, Rob Walker, set out to determine if storytelling was actually the most powerful tool of all. So he started his project by collating about 200 just random low cost items that were on average $1, 1.25. And there was nothing particularly special about them. You can see here there's like a plastic horse's head. There was like a motel room key, a plastic banana. I mean, just super random stuff. But what he did then was phoned 200 authors, writers, and said, "Do you want to put a story to this item?" So each of them said yes, obviously. And then he auctioned these items with the stories on eBay with the descriptions in the description box. And so what happened then was these items, the values of these items went up, massively. This horse's head sold for $62.95 when he bought it for just 99 cents. So, you know, was this a once off? Like, not really. In total, he spent $197 on the items and ended up selling them for almost $8,000. That's a markup of 6,300%, which is just insane when you think about it. And that really was all thanks to the stories, which had transformed these otherwise objects of no little to no value. So, how is it so easy for us to fall for stories? Like, how can we part with $60 more for a secondhand plastic horse's head than when it had been bought for $1? So, the simple answer is stories that they play on our emotions. And when we feel these emotions, we become less objective and less critically observant. Uh, the emotions literally hijack our prefrontal cortex. So we become easily duped into buying and doing things that we might not ordinarily do. So, why is this? I suppose this is a scan of a mother and child bonding, and it shows the neurochemical responses in the brains to bonding. So oxytocin is this bonding hormone, and it's what is released when we are close to another person through mothering, through falling in love, through friendship. And that is why they say that love is a drug, because it literally is. And that is why heartbreak or the weaning of the honeymoon period changes your perception. So, on average, we biochemically fall out of love after 13 months. You may find yourself looking at your partner saying, I used to think that the way they ate porridge was the most glorious thing in the world. And now I just never want to look at them eat ever again. But that's because during the first 13 months when your brain was flooded with neurotransmitters and hormones hijacking your brain, you're throwing your prefrontal cortex off and throwing your objectivity and observance skills out the window. So they could have done anything and it would have been amazing because you were high on drugs. So the same thing happens with storytelling. Hormones like serotonin, dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin, they're all releasing depending on the type of story that you tell. So obviously, as we've spoken, oxytocin is the hormone that is released when you're telling an evocative story. And this is, a really powerful, like hormonal cocktail that can get you to motivate people even beyond logic. So where do we begin with storytelling? So the most important bit, um, again, Maya Angelou, one of my favorite artists, she says, people will forget what you did, people will forget what you said, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And so that's the primary thing. What we see here is long past the actual event occurring, long past, the people we meet, what remains is the feelings that are associated with them or that event. And why that's important is because stories leave you with feelings, and those are the things that will bond you. And so, if when you write a story, you need to be very, very clear on the feelings that you want your audience to be left with before you even begin to create your story. So, we're going to watch a little video here, and if tech is my friend, you'll be able to watch it. Yeah, there's no sound to this one thing. So I really would love interaction here now. So if anyone has any thoughts on this, please do pop it in. So what do you think happened here? Uh, Pop it into the chat box. Otherwise, I'll just be shouting into the ethers of the internet. Um, Brilliant. I love it. By two parents and a child. Thank you. Any other suggestions? What are the two parents and the child doing? Okay, cool. So, what actually happened here? And this is really interesting. Arrows hurting the dot. Yeah, they're annoyed. The shift in dynamics. Really interesting. Thank you so much, Tom, Camilla. Thank you. Um, so what actually happened here is that two triangles and a circle were going around a rectangle. And so this is what's so interesting about the human brain is that we really use stories, we attribute stories to situations that we can make sense of. So we can understand what's happening. We can understand the life in front of us. We can we use stories as well to feel understood. And so our brains literally scramble to try and make sense of what's happening because it just does not like ambiguity. So it aims for a connection. Because as a basic animal instinct, we need connection to survive. But the key to storytelling is that we actually need conflict, pain, and adversity to drive the narrative of the story. And Florence Welch is a poet, in my opinion, but one of her lyrics from her song No Choir is, "It's hard to write about being happy because the older I get, I find that happiness is an extremely uneventful subject." And, it's a really brilliant way. And what she's saying here is it's very hard to write something that people have any interest in if you're just sitting on a bench being happy. And it's the same with stories, because we all suffer. The Buddha says it's the nature of suffering is the nature of humanity. Like that is what happens. And so when we share suffering or adversity in a story, we really begin to empathize with the character, and we can see ourselves in the character, and often we begin to feel seen. So we really want those receiving the story to subconsciously or consciously say, "In you, I see me, and because of that, I feel connected or bonded to you." And so we're looking at the basic story arc that is used throughout time. Um, all storytellers naturally follow this, and the content varies, but the structures remains quite the same. So the first stage is exposition. So this is the stage where you set up the where, how, why, and when of the story. The next is conflict. And this is what Florence was saying. It's very hard to write a story if you're flatlining on that bench and you're happy out. So we need something to incite movement. And this is where conflict happens. And then next, the rising action. So this is when there are cumulative actions or events that occur because of the conflict. And then we reach the climax. This is the most important peak of the story. And then afterwards, it's the falling action of what happens. And then the story ends with a resolution. So if we were to take a basic rom-com movie template here, we can just look at two people meet, sunny New York, happy dating montage, and then suddenly, one person gets cold feet. And so we have this conflict here, and we have this sense that they're like, oh no, I don't want to be in it. And then they break up all of a sudden. And so after that, then they realize, maybe they're miserable and they don't want to continue this pattern. So they go into a spiral of trying to figure out and do some internal healing. And then the climax is potentially, the couple meet in a supermarket or something down the line, and then we see a montage of them getting back together and figuring things out, and the happy ever after ending. So this is all great, I suppose, in terms of like outside of business, but how do we use this narrative arc internally in business, where we are potentially giving a pitch to investors, we're pitching to our boss, or we're presenting a problem to our customers. So these 5 stages are now applied to pitching a business case. So the first one would be setting the scene. What's happening right now. Normally, some sort of change is happening, and you need to kind of set the scene of this is where we are. This is the difficulty. This is the problem. And then we move into the challenges faced, some more specific detail on what isn't working, what has changed, or what could be much better. So you use statistics here or market insights to back up your assertions, and that really, really helps. And the next is the recognition of the problem. So this is the climax. This is the big problem summarized. Everything so far has led to this point. Then we look at the solution. So the solution looks like this. Fear not, we have the answers. Here's what you can do to move forward and why you need or want us or our solution. And then at the end, it's support and evidence, proof that you can deliver what you promise. You could have validation, you could have impact stories, you could have results, or you could have quotes from customers. And then really what's not on the screen here is the call to action. So this really is important, to end it with but let's have a conversation, or here's our contact information, or talk to Tom and wherever, because it leads them all to the solution of coming to you. So how does this look like in business? One of my favorite campaigns that does this is a shaving company called Harry's. I'm not sure if you can actually get this product in Ireland yet, but anyone I've ever showed this video to in Ireland tries to buy them because the, this is the power of great advertising and great storytelling merged. So Harry's, this is their tagline. We thought quality razors were expensive to make too until we made them. And so what we see here is their inclusive language and we're in the word we and two, um, and the words quality and expensive. So we're already getting an idea that like, oh, we're getting ripped off. And then until we made them. So we see the solution here, they come in as the saviors. I'm going to play a great video from Harry's now. So hopefully, again, technology being my friend, you can hear it and we can have a quick chat after.
In the early 1980s, a child was born. Two of them, actually. Their names were Jeff and Andy. And inside these young men was what would become something great. Time went by, Jeff and Andy grew up, and they developed facial hair.
I grew my first mustache when I was 11.
Probably like 13. And one day, while buying razors, something happened. Andy got ripped off.
Getting ripped off sucked. Why do razors cost so much? Like there's no real good reason.
Actually, Jeff, there is a reason. One big razor company has relentlessly increased prices for decades, making insane profits at the expense of customers. So Jeff and Andy decided to start their own shop. Jeff and Andy's parents were proud.
We can take on a big razor and never make it prices for life. Oh, hell yes.
Jeff and Andy take their destiny seriously because there's a big difference between good and bad razors.
That's particularly true when you're taking like a knife to your face. We almost put a bullet in the idea 6 months in because we're like, we just don't know if we can actually make the products.
It left Jeff and Andy with only one way to maintain quality and keep prices down.
Bought a factory.
They bought a factory. Not just any factory.
They bought my factory.
They bought Fine Tech, 95-year-old German factory. Where over 600 German engineers, craftsmen, and production workers create millions of precision blades a year.
And they thought we were completely crazy. They called us the American Internet Cowboys.
Oh, I'm calling these products.
You're a good hugger, Mr. Becker.
With the purchase of Fine Tech, the American Internet discovered a way to create razors of exceptional quality without the questionable design.
So we essentially wanted to do the exact opposite of what's out there, less but better. Theirs looks like it was shot out of space. We want something that looks like it was made on Earth.
And by taking less profit and selling directly to you over the internet, Harry's can offer an exceptional deal. Half the blade price, and with all those smart and that factory stuff, and those sharp razors, and the handsome flames, and a smooth hair. Big Razor got nervous.
They threatened to sue our pants off.
Big Razor threatened to sue their pants off. And that's kind of the whole point of this film. Jeff and Andy are two guys who put their pants on one leg at a time, just like you. They need to shave, just like you. They don't want to pay too much and like good design, like you. But don't take it from us. Take it from a few of our 2,700,009 clean shaven customers.
I'm Jeff. I'm Andy. This is Harris.
Meet the shaving. It's so shaving. Harris.
Every time I watch that, I'm like, it's just genius. It's so good. Any thoughts on that? If anyone has any thoughts, pop it into the chat box. But I mean, they just used every trick in the book. They used the great story arc. We have the David versus Goliath story. We have the narrative of, just like you. They put on their pants one step at a time, just like you. And it's us, it's the storyteller and the person, engaging in the story that's against Gillette. We're all like, yeah, actually that's ridiculous. And you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that they've gone and done this. Like, I'm so like, I mean, all I'm hearing is like endorphins, like oxytocin, like just those hormones are flying. And so yeah, like it's just very, very interesting because it's the humor, it's the accessibility, it's the likability that really draws us to this brand because of their story. So Donald Miller is from Story Brand. And he says, in stories, a dastardly villain is a critical character. They are the force that ultimately catalyzes our hero to take action and overcome the problem. And as the audience, we love a great villain. They deepen our love for the hero, they amplify the stakes of the story, and they draw us in and keep us watching because we want to see our hero take down the bad guy. And your brand story needs a villain too. So moving on to another brand that I love that does great storytelling, but in a different way, is Chupi. So Chupi is an Irish jewelry brand run by Chupi Sweetnam. They originally were based out of Paris Court in Dublin, but they're after expanding since. So this is a simple ring. This is just a gold ring. I mean, there's, you can attribute as much or as little to it as you like. But when Chupi adds her story to it, it's now a ring with a story, a meaning attached, just like the horse's head. And it's more likely that if the story resonates with you, then you will pay more for it than the previous picture. So just to read this little Instagram snippet, she said she's been marking each year with a Chupi piece for a while now. Last year, she got herself the Promise Me diamond ring to commemorate the creation of her business and its continued success over the past 2 years. But this year, she needed to be reminded that there's still hope for better times to come because of everything that's happening in our world. She chose the North Star signet ring to mark 2021. She said whenever she looks at her hand, she gets a burst of happiness and joy, knowing she'll be treasuring these memories forever. So again, I mean, it's touching on the pandemic. We can all buy into that. It's the Promise Me diamond ring. It's about, this woman's commitment to herself. So like she's created a gorgeous story in such a short space of time. And so, this woman bought this ring with the knowing that she has her own emotional attachment linked to the ring, saying, oh, every time I look at this will be a reminder of how far I've come and how much more I can go because it's my North Star. And so, it's just already exponentially more valuable to this woman. But it doesn't always have to be about our product. Chupi is really great at building that emotional connection with her because it is named after her. It's her brand, her story, her product. Um, and bonding with the owner mightn't be something that every company is comfortable with, but it is just an example that I'll give you if it is a more local business or more personal business with your customers. So Chupi really, in this post, she really kind of tells us a bit about, the birth of her new child and the kind of impact of her work and how she's expanding. And basically, she's thanking everyone who's reading the post, all of our audience, for entrusting Chupi with their most precious moments. And what she does is shares people engagement stories, their heartbreaks, all of those throughout her Instagram. And so she's really using inclusive language, and again, I mean, a cute baby is just it's just going to release all of those gorgeous hormones. And we see Chupi as a human, a mother, wife, a daughter. And so again, it's that real humanization of the person, of the brand, of the product, of the business, which is so, so, so powerful because it's very difficult to connect with statistics, a lot easier to connect with a human. So with storytelling, um, where is it going? We've discussed so far the story arc, how this can apply to a business case or pitch. I've shown you how a brand uses the arc to build buy-in and loyalty, and I've shown you how stories change the value of an item due to the emotional weight attached. So, what is the future of storytelling looking like with regards to businesses? Well, the next thing that's happening is called data-driven storytelling. And I'm going to speak to two things. I'm going to show you two clips, which I think will be really helpful. So the first is about the future of storytelling with regards to these new tech developments with, especially with the new AI features that can easily create a blog in 2 minutes, rendering the role of copywriting almost redundant. But I really love MIT's Deb Roy's opinion on this. And I'll speak more about it afterwards. But the second thing that I'm going to show you will be to take a look at what Ferry Pizzoni, an SEO driven expert, uses, who uses a combination of storytelling and data to his advantage. So he did this really interesting technique to compile data and wrap that in a story and send to journalists so that they could publish stories creating backlinks for him. 1 minute.
I think that there's a growing awareness and concern about just algorithmic bias. There's a growing recognition, within technical communities and more generally that any kind of artificial intelligence technologies that are relying on machine learning, they're basically looking back in time and feeding on data, historical data, finding patterns within that historical data, and then making future decisions based on those patterns, right? But if we're not just using these machines to make predictions, but to actually guide decisions, then we're sort of getting potentially locked into our past, locked into our history, and continuing sort of those patterns into the future. I think that's a super important concern, and I think absolutely in the context that we're discussing today around storytelling and making creative decisions. In some ways, the death of creativity is to end up trapped in just repeating patterns from the past. A place where I disagree.
Okay, and we can just move on to over here.
Bloomberg, The Sun, Telegraph, Express, Standard UK, and it only took me 3 hours of work. Let me show you exactly how I've done it. I will even share with you the email that I've sent to the journalists, the exact pitch. So let's jump on my screen and let's see how I've done it. So the research was quite simple. All I had to do is just go to Google Trends and put in electric car and search for it. It was like 30 seconds research. That's all the research needed for this campaign. Then the data has shown me that there's been a massive hike in searches for electric cars because of the fuel shortage. People were disappointed by not having petrol in their tank and they were looking for an alternative solution. And everyone was looking for electric cars. As you can see here, there's a massive spike. The actual data for 7 days back then was even more spectacular. When I've done the research on the 25th, this was on Saturday, there was a massive spike on the 24th. So the data was showing quite a spectacular hike in online searches for electric car keyword. This chart is the story. This is a story that got all of these backlinks. So what I've done is I took this screenshot, I attached it to an email, and I composed just a simple email saying, look, this is what we found. This is what our client, carguide.co.uk, has found. And we've added an expert commentary on the situation. Let me show you how the email looks like. This is how the email looks like. It's so simple. Just said, hey, Michael, or hey, journalist name. Analysis of Google search data reveals online searches for electric cars exploded 1,600%, which is like 16 times on the 24th of September. As you can see on this chart reflects exactly what I put in the email. We just a new finding by our client reveals that the online interest skyrocketed, and then we've added like an extra commentary from our client on the situation, and then we added some really good like factual stats about electric car registrations in August. We put in the sources, and then we further commented on it. And then I just say, if you need anything else, do feel free to get in touch. We've attached 2 images here, and happy days. That's all. That's the whole campaign. It literally took me like probably 1 hour to do the research and to craft this little email.
Okay. So yeah, really interesting way of using storytelling in with data, and that is the future for pitching PR. So stories are in our genes still. So in summary, all of what I've spoken about is to show that stories are literally in our genetics, and they have a very real and powerful call to action. So this is because, around 100,000 years ago, we started to develop our language. It has been proven that we started to use storytelling to transfer knowledge from generation to generation. About 27,000 years ago, we started to transfer knowledge from generation to generation through cave paintings. Then about 3,500 years ago, we started to transfer knowledge through our power of the written form. It was only 30 years ago that we started using PowerPoint and Excel. So our brains are actually, more, it's just so deeply wired in us to transfer information, to connect, to communicate through stories. And really that is the summary of this presentation today, is that that tool and that skill set absolutely can be developed and reawoken in the self to apply to your business, apply to communicating to your customers, to investors, and to those who need to hear you most. And as my dad says, don't ever let truth get in the way of a good story. Anybody have any questions? You want to unmute yourself or pop it in the chat box? I might stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that was very interesting. And I have a quick question. How do you think we could develop this ability, which according to you is within all of us?
Yeah. So I think there's two things. Number one, humanization, really getting in touch with the humanization of yourself or your brand, really looking at it as if it has, like that hero's journey, where are you in your hero's journey? Where is your business in your hero's journey? And then the second thing is using that narrative arc as your template to say, right, well, where are my challenges? What's my setup like? Where's my business at? What are the challenges that we're going through? What are the problems that we're solving for people? And then you can, provide the solutions and then the outcome. So it's really a matter of understanding yourself, understanding your business, humanizing that, because people relate to authenticity, and authenticity is very, very human. And people relate to stories, so it's facts nearly removed and wrapped in a story. So then you use the arc once you understand the emotional side of the business or the story. Does that help?
That's very helpful. Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Trisha, for your explanation and for your time. It was great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your question. Anyone else?
Any other questions? Yeah, just feel free to turn on your camera or your microphone or just put it in the chat. If not, then you've been incredible.
Yeah, thanks.
I have one last question if no one else have one. I'm just curious, Trisha, you introduce yourself as a storyteller. So basically, what does a storyteller does? What do you do exactly?
So I write. I'm just after finishing my first of a 4-part series of novels. I also do things like this, give talks, but I'm also I also teach English, and I'm also a yogi as well and a space holder. So I do retreats and workshops like that. So kind of like multi hats, but I think the string that ties them all together is the humanity, really looking at myself as a human, my own suffering, and how to help those understand their own suffering, alleviate it, and to increase connection in the world, really. So that's really, once we can connect to ourselves and understand ourselves, that's the sure way to authentically connect with other people in a heart-centered way. And so that's really what I'm about, I think.
Okay. Awesome. Very inspiring. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'll just, if you would like to host a Lunch and Learn, we're of course open to anyone who would be interested. So I'm just going to pop my email in the chat box in case anyone wants to reach out. And thanks so much, Trisha. That was super interesting, inspiring, as Charlie said.
Yeah, well, thanks everybody for showing up. Really appreciate it, and hope to see you all around our public work soon, or reach out.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.